BIONICLE Chronicles 4, Tales of the Masks. Written by Greg Farshidi. Narrated by Trajan M. Chapter 3, Matau's Tale, The Trap. Wenua wore the same smile as he finished his story.
You see, Onua remembered the past even when I did not. The Toa are wise enough to understand. You trusted your Toa, and he trusted you, Onua replied. But do they trust one another?
Makama glanced at Onua, then at Matau. Our brother of stone speaks the truth, though I'm sorry to say it. There's little friendship left among the Toa, it seems.
Do not be so quick-jumping, Vakama,
Matau, the Turaga of Likoro, answered.
There is much you do not know. Let me tell my tale of Toa and trust.
Liwa Nuva, Toa of Air, stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the lush domain of Le-Wahi. Hidden in the jungle below was his village, Likoro, only recently rebuilt after being leveled by the Bow-Rock. He shuddered a little at the memory. The day the insect-like Levox swarm succeeded in sweeping away the village was the same day they captured him, removed his mask of power, and used one of their parasitic Krana to make him one of them. He could have resisted, of course, but the Levok had already taken over Turaga Matau and the Lima Torin. Challenging the Borak might have placed his friends in danger. He closed his eyes and did his best to drive the memories away. For a brief time, his mind had been filled with thoughts that were not his own. They were the voices of the swarm, commanding him to help them complete their task on Matanui. Had it not been for Onua's timely rescue, Liwa knew he might still be a servant of the Borak. It had taken him a long time to feel comfortable after that. The other Toa, particularly Tahu, treated him differently. Some felt sorry for him, others seemed nervous that he might turn against them. Now, when he finally felt like the old Liwa again, his power over air was gone. Once more, as he journeyed through this land he knew so well, he felt lost. That was what had brought him to the cliff. In the days since his power disappeared, he had not attempted to glide on the air. Before he could command the wind to keep him flying. Now it would not listen to him. Wisdom said he should keep to the trees and vines, or worse, walk on the ground. But the day he did that, he knew, would be the day he stopped being a Toa. He fitted his twin air katana onto his arms and legs, turning them into glider wings. The breeze was right. If all went well, he would soar over the jungle and land in the heart of Likoro. He took a step forward.
Toa Liwa!
Startled, Liwa almost fell. He fought to keep his balance, not easy with the glider wings in place. Then a hand grabbed his and pulled him back from the edge. It was Turaga Matau, looking concerned.
Word is Deepwood that you are sneaking Kanohi Nuva masks. There are no power masks here, only mountain rock.
I know, Turaga, said Liwa, but I have been tree-bound for too many suns now. It's time to ride the wind again. Matau laughed.
Is this a day for sun soaring? Very well, then. You'll find your Toa brother on the ground path below. Try not to hard land on him.
Another Toa in Le-Wahi? Yes. Now that Liwa thought of it, there was something new in the wind. The scent of smoke.
Yes, and hot fire, too, said Matau. Enough to dark dash Likoro again, if someone does not stop it.
The Turaga said the words lightly, but there was no mistaking their meaning. Likoro was in danger again. No matter the cause, Liwa would not fail his village a second time. He stepped to the edge of the cliff, took a deep breath, and launched himself into the wind. At first he had a hard time holding steady. Gusts blew him about like a leaf, up and above the mountain and down almost to the treetops. The smell of fire was much stronger now, but Liwa still could not see any flames. He shifted his body to try and turn right. The wind had other ideas, blowing him toward the left and into a spiral toward the ground. By instinct, he tried to summon the air currents to carry him high again. But the air would no more listen to him these days than it would to Gali or Tahu. Of course, it must be the Toa of fire down below. If smoke was in the wind, did that mean he had somehow regained his powers? Liwa had to know. There was no more time for testing his flying. He triggered the power of the Mask of Levitation and floated gently to the ground. Liwa did not like being on the flat earth. Yes, it was better than being in the water, which he positively hated. But he always felt clumsy when he ground walked, not like when he was swinging through the trees. Liwa loped along the path, following the scent of fire. He could hear the crackling sound of the flames feeding on old branches. He hoped it was not the trees of Likoro that were burning. Coming around a rock, he saw Tahu. The Toa of Fire was standing in front of a blaze, magma swords in hand. Liwa recognized his stance. Tahu was trying to stop the fire by drawing the flame into his swords, but it was not working. His power, too, was gone. Liwa rushed over to him. At first, Tahu did not seem to notice the other Toa. Liwa had to grab his arm to get his attention. "Tahu! Trying to quick burn the jungle fire, Toa?" Tahu shook him off.
Toa of fire? Toa of nothing! I no longer command the flames, Liwa.
A small group of Limatorans scurried into the clearing and began shoveling earth on the fire to put it out. Liwa led his brother Toa away. "We all face the same hard luck, Tahu. But it's no time for anger shouts. Why have you come to Likoro?" Tahu looked at the Toa of Air. He'd always liked Liwa, even if their ideas about being a Toa were very different. Liwa saw it as fun and adventure. Tahu as a serious task. But so much had changed in the last few weeks. Liwa taken over by Balrog, the Toa Nu was splitting apart, now the loss of all their powers. Tahu was no longer certain what, or who, he could trust.
"It is not your concern, brother," replied Tahu. "I will not be in your region long. Once I have what I've come for, I will be on my way."
"If you search for anything in my lands, then a wayfinder you must have," said Liwa brightly. "And a wayfinder I shall be. Taragavakama has told you where a mask can be found?"
"Two,"
said Tahu, already walking away.
"I would welcome your company, Toa of Air. That way I can keep an eye on you,"
the Toa of Fire added to himself. Of all the regions of Badanui, Le-Wahi was easily the most difficult to travel through. The air was heavy with rain, and the ground was mostly mud. The farther one went into the heart of the Wahi, the denser the jungle growth became. Even for Toa, hacking through vines every step of the way was exhausting. However, if Tahu and Liwa were tired, the sight that met their eyes in the center of the swamp was enough to wake them up. A grove of trees had been torn out of the ground, roots and all, and piled on top of one another to block the path. An even worse surprise waited when Tahu tried to lift one of the trees. Even without the great mask of strength, the Toa should have been able to toss a swamp tree aside. But this one felt like it weighed twice as much as Mount Ihu. After 3 tries, Tahu gave up.
"Le-Wahi has been here," he said. "This is its work."
"How could a Borah-Kal do this?"
"It controls gravity, Liwa. First it makes the trees so light they float out of the ground. Then so heavy they crash into the earth and cannot be moved. You of all Toa should know that."
Liwa stiffened. When he spoke, the normally light tone of his voice was gone, replaced by anger. "No, I did not choose the Borak dark time I lived through. I do not know where the Borah-Kal are or what they are doing." Tahu leaned in close until their masks almost touched and said harshly,
"How do I know that? How do I know your wayfinding is not leading me into an ambush?"
"If I were your enemy, you would be late knowing. Better to think about Le-Wahi." Tahu frowned. He could not help being suspicious of Liwa, whose might have been so recently been controlled by their enemies, the Balrog. None of the other Toa knew that Tahu, too, had once lost a mask and had it replaced with a Krana. Although he had not worn it long enough to be absorbed into the swarm, he knew how powerful the Krana could be. Sometimes the Toa of Fire worried that his decision to split up the team might have been caused by the Balrog somehow.
"All right, then,"
Tahu said, backing off.
"The Kal knows we need the masks of power, so it's probably heading for the same spot we are. We find it, we capture it, and we make it give it our powers back."
Liwu began to scale the barrier, climbing effortlessly over the stacked trees. "You are heart-feeling, brother, not head-thinking. Le-Wahi is not so easy to capture. Take one step toward it and you are high-flying or ground-bound." Tahu began to climb, but it was not quite as easy for him as it had been for Liwa. Once he slipped and almost fell back to the bottom, which did nothing to improve his mood.
"Do you have a better idea, Liwa? Perhaps if we ask the Le-Wahi to give us back our Toa powers, it will agree to think about it."
"Think about it," Liwa repeated. Then he jumped from the top of the barrier, went into a roll-on landing, and leapt into a tree. "Matanui! What a quick, smart idea, brother!" Tahu reached the top of the barrier and looked at Liwa as if his brother Toa had turned into a giant swamp lizard.
"I am beginning to wonder, Liwa, if the Toa of Air has too much of it inside his head. What idea?"
Liwa was now springing from one branch to another almost faster than the eye could follow. "Have you ever seen a nui jaga at a bog snake nest?" Tahu shook his head. He knew that the giant scorpion-like nui jaga liked to feast on bog snakes, but he had never witnessed it. He swatted aside a swarm of insects and snapped,
"No, and what does that have to do with anything?"
"Nui jaga very huge big," answered Liwa from high atop a tree. Then he jumped off, flipped over and over, and landed on a lower branch. "Bog snakes are many but small. So what to do when hungry Rahi comes around?" Liwa dropped to the ground in front of Tahu. "Bog snakes come in from front, behind, up tree, down tree, all at once. Nui jaga gets confused, too many for even Sharp Stinger to stop. Understand now?" Tahu had to admit that this was a rare case where he did understand exactly what Liwa was saying. The two Toa began to plan. Liwa sent a message back to Likoro, instructing Turaga Matau to gather as many vinesmen and wind riders as possible and send them to the Toa. Meanwhile, Tahu went to scout ahead and see if he could spot the Borah-Kal. When he returned, Liwa was already putting the Matoran to work. The green-masked villagers were up in the trees all around, tying off branches, readying rocks, and rigging nets made of vine. Tahu was impressed.
"They work hard, brother. You should be proud of them."
Liwa smiled. "They learn from Life Dawn that he who climbs fastest and highest will get the sweetest fruit. And they have special reason to want any Boraks stopped." Tahu looked around. Of the dozens and dozens of trees that surrounded the clearing, not one was empty. Even if no Matoran was visible, the rustle of the branches said one was at work, turning the jungle into a giant Borah-Kal trap. The idea was a simple one. Borah-Kal was incredibly powerful, but all power had some limit. Come with the call from different directions, like the bog snakes to the Nui Jaga, and make it use its power again and again. With luck, it would reach its limit. If not,
"What happens if this doesn't work, Toa-Tahu?"
The question came from Kongu, one of the Likora Matoran.
"It has to,"
Tahu replied. "It will," said Liwa. "Now we just have to lure the Borah-Kal to this spot."
"We'll need some clever trick," said Tahu. "Some bait it cannot resist."
Liwa turned to the Toa of Fire with a broad smile. "Make sure you shout loud, so the Kal can hear you, brother." Borah-Kal was angry. Its mission was to find and free the trapped queens of the Borak swarms, and it wanted to be doing that. But Tanak-Kal had ordered that the Kanohi Nuva masks be found and hidden so the Toa could not use them. Borah-Kal had been searching for the masks since first light, with no luck. It did not like the jungle. Too many places for enemies to hide. Not that anything on this island could threaten a Borah-Kal.
"Creature!"
boomed the voice of the Toa of Fire.
"Turn and face justice for your deeds!"
Borah-Kal wheeled around to see Tahu, magma swords drawn. Far from being a frightening sight, the Kal would have laughed if it were able. Instead, its harsh voice hissed, "Tahu, I thought I smelled the scent of failure somewhere nearby."
"Then perhaps you should bathe more often, Borak," Tahu replied. "Are the powerful Kal searching the jungle for scraps, or are you just lost?"
The Kal didn't respond with words. Instead, it lifted its shield and sent waves of gravitic energy at the Toa of Fire. Rocks and trees, freed of the bonds of gravity, began to float into the air all around Tahu. Slowly, they drifted together until they were hovering just above the Toa's head. Tahu flipped backward a split second before Borah-Kal increased gravity by 100 times. Stone and wood slammed into the ground where he had been standing, coming down so hard they buried themselves deep in the mud. The Toa of Fire scrambled to his feet and shouted,
"Follow me, Borak! Perhaps we can find more rocks for you to throw!"
Then Tahu raced away, heading for the clearing where Liwa waited. He knew Borah-Kal was following, for he could feel his legs growing heavier with each step. If the Borah-Kal got any closer, its power would root Tahu to the ground, and the plan would fail. The Toa of Fire's only chance was the unexpected. He raced up a slope, leaped, and grabbed a tree branch. He spun around a branch to build up momentum. At the peak of his motion, he let go and shot forward like a Matoran disc. He almost missed the vine he was shooting for, grabbing at the last moment. Tahu swung out over the jungle, letting go of one vine only to grab another. He could hear the trees falling behind him as the Borah-Kal continued to chase. One final swing brought Tahu into the clearing. Halfway through his arc, he let go and landed hard in the mud. Liwa rushed over, not sure whether to be stunned or amused at the sight of the Toa of Fire as a vine swinger.
Don't say a word,
Tahu warned. I wouldn't think dream of it, said Liwa, trying hard to hide a smile. Everything is ready.
Good, it's right behind me.
The two Toa split up, each rushing to a different side of the clearing. The Borah-Kal burst through the trees a second later, shouting,
Toa, you cannot escape from the Borah-Kal.
Liwa thrust his air katana into the air. Now! He yelled, and chaos was unleashed. From all around the clearing, Matoran slung discs and stones and branches, all aimed right at the intruder. Borah-Kal reflected by reflex, using its power to erase gravity from each and every object thrown. But even as they flooded toward the sky, more came to replace them. The Borah-Kal spun around frantically, trying to keep track of everything coming its way. Liwa waved to get Tahu's attention. Brother, I can quick steal his Chronicles! Tahu shouted, No, wait! But it was too late. Liwa had already broken into a run, leaped, and went crashing into the ground when Borah-Kal's power struck him. He lay at the Borah-Kal's feet, pinned to the ground by the crushing weight of gravity. Tahu started forward to rescue him, then paused. What if Liwa was still being controlled by the Borah? What if this was all a trick? Could he trust Toa, who had been part of a swarm such a short time ago? The whole trap had been Liwa's idea, but who was meant to be caught in the snare? All of this ran through the Toa of Fire's mind in an instant. His answer came to him even more quickly. He could not, would not, turn his back on a brother Toa, no matter what. He charged. Borah-Kal turned to face him and unleashed his devastating power. But Tahu was already gone, leaping up and spinning in the air, striking the falling stones with his magma swords. One rock crashed into another, sending it hurtling into a third, all moving too fast for even the Borah-Kal's eyes to follow. No sooner did the Kal send its power against one stone than it was ricocheting off three more, all scattering in different directions. In all of this, Liwa was not forgotten. Tahu hit the ground, grabbed the Toa of Air, and carried him to the safety of the trees.
Stay here, he ordered. I will deal with the Kal.
But Borah-Kal had had enough. As Liwa had predicted, the constant rain of rock and wood, and the effort to stop it, had all exhausted the Borah-Kal's power. It stumbled into the jungle, using its last reserves to bring trees down behind it to slow pursuit. Tahu started after him, but Liwa called, Wait, Tahu! Let it go. There will be another clash time to settle with the Kal. The Toa of Fire wanted to argue, but hadn't he just realized he had to trust Liwa? He turned back and said,
You may be right. Are you ready to travel? You have Kanohi-mas to find, after all, my brother.
Together, the two Toa headed into the jungle. Tahu walking, Liwa swinging through the trees. How can you ground walk, Tahu, now that you vine swung?
I leave the trees to you, brother. And if you ever tell anyone about that,
I'll our secret, answered Liwa. Heart swear. But next time, work on that hard land, brother. Then the Toa of Air's laughter could be heard all over Le-Wahi. And the Toa of Fire's, too. End of Chapter 3.